The house in Austria where Adolf Hitler was born has been officially reopened as a police station. The government says the move is meant to stop the building becoming a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis. But the decision has divided opinion, with some arguing it should have been turned into a museum or centre for historical education.
A brass band for the opening of a police station at an address burdened by history. Adolf Hitler was born in this building in Braunau am Inn in 1889. His family left when he was still a child, but the house later became a destination for neo-Nazis and other far-right extremists. It's now a police station housing around 50 officers. The Austrian government says placing the police here is a clear rejection of everything Hitler and the Nazi regime represented.
Die Republik Österreich,
the Republic of Austria, the state, the country is facing up to this heritage, the terrible heritage of that time, and is committed to dealing with it. That includes this house and this address.
Dieses Haus und diese Adresse.
The state took ownership after a lengthy dispute with the former owner. The renovation cost around 20 million euros. The building was painted white, its arch windows replaced and its exterior altered. Construction debris was reportedly disposed of at a secret location to prevent it being collected as Nazi memorabilia. A plaque now explains Hitler's connection to the house and his responsibility for mass murder. The memorial stone outside remains in place, bearing the words, "Never again fascism." Some visitors welcome the building's new use.
It's great that this house is now a police station. I'd prefer if it didn't say outside that this was Hitler's birthplace. You don't need to attract the fans.
But others believe the site should play a more direct role in teaching future generations about the Nazi period.
I can't decide or judge that, but under certain circumstances it might be more suitable as a museum or a contemporary history meeting place.
The Austrian government rejected the museum proposal, arguing that it could itself attract extremists. Instead, it hopes the police presence will finally end the building's appeal as a place of Nazi pilgrimage.
Well, let's explore this with Jeffrey Olick, who's an expert on collective memory and Germany's reckoning with its Nazi past. He's a professor of sociology and history at the University of Virginia in the United States and joins us from Ithaca in New York State. Welcome to DW, Professor. What do you make of this Austrian decision?
It's an unusual one. Usually the choice is either to create some kind of historical marker, a place of information, a commemorative site, or to get rid of it entirely. And so this is sort of either halfway in between or something entirely new. I think there's something clever in a way about making it a police station because you have the forces right there to respond if something happens outside or if the wrong kind of people are gathering. By the same token, the people will still gather there in any case. They may just be better behaved. So it's certainly not what we see in the normal template of commemorative ways of confronting the past, but it has some interest, if also some problems.
Right. 20 million euros or so seems like quite a lot of money when you could have just knocked it down and tried to completely forget all about it.
Yeah, of course, knocking it down wouldn't have stopped people from coming anyway. There are records of where it was, and people can stand on an empty site as well as they can at a building. It could be if something else was put in its place and it was erased, as for instance happened in Berlin with the Hitler bunker, where it's a little bit hard to find unless you know exactly what you're looking for, and new commercial enterprises have been put there. And so over time, perhaps that becomes simply a part of the normal landscape that nobody notices anymore. Of course, there's a cost if nobody notices this important history. So it's not only the wrong people who will come there to celebrate, but people might have come for neutral reasons, or people might have come to commemorate and to mourn what could be associated with what began there.
The idea of turning it into something mundane is interesting, isn't it? I was just thinking about this. I was looking at Spandau Prison here in Berlin, which was demolished completely without consulting German authorities, and I think there's now a supermarket there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the more common if you start making a list of all the bad things that have been associated with all sorts of different places. Certainly there are commemorative sites, there are the concentration camps, there are the museums, there are the historical markers, but the overwhelming majority of historical sites have been converted into mundane uses. Sometimes there's a little marker there, sometimes they're not. Of course, there's a long history in Germany and elsewhere of regretting that erasure. So for instance, the Stolpersteine or Stumbling Stones project makes the point that we shouldn't just go about our business on territory in places where bad things happen. We should stumble over them. We should have our daily lives interrupted. So again, it's a really complicated issue. And as you mentioned in the piece, lots of interesting and smart people have been debating it for quite some time.
You talk us through some more of the considerations you think authorities weigh up or need to weigh up when they're deciding the fate of a site with a notorious past.
Yeah, it's a very difficult choice between wanting to remember and finding it important to remember and not forgetting what happened, and not wanting, on the one hand, to be used in ways that we don't want, or on the other hand, for us not being able to move forward from the past. Whenever you mark the past, you're telling people that this is what they should focus on. It should be part of their daily lives. They should think about it even when they're just going about their normal business. So it's a difficult needle to thread. And as you said, it costs $20 million that could have been dealt with in much easier ways. But the other part of it is that we never know how people respond to symbols. So in fact, this could make it a place of protest. One of the complications of this particular issue is the idea of turning it into a police station rather than another mundane kind of administrative function. The argument, as far as I understand, is that the idea of police is associated with the rule of law and with democracy, especially a police that's been trained in democracy. And so making it a police station stands against the memory of fascism. On the other hand, it also represses the fact that Nazi Germany was a police state, and the police is not an unequivocally positive or democratic association. It also prevents us from asking the question, of course, police forces, modern police forces contain multitudes, lots of different people, some of whom in fact may have sympathies for far-right elements. And so the idea that the police is the antidote to fascism struck me in my American ears at the particular moment we're in as an odd choice.
And how much should the public be consulted in a decision like this? Because on the one hand, you might say, well, as an antidote to fascism, it's all about democracy. But on the other hand, you might not get the answer you want.
Yeah, that's the risk of democracy, is that people may choose things that leadership groups or elites don't particularly want them to choose or haven't learned, quote unquote, the right lessons from the past. I do think it's extraordinarily important that the people who design these memorials, the people who make these decisions, listen as widely as they can. And as I think your piece mentioned, the debate has been going on for approximately 7 years, if not, in fact, longer than that. There have been lots of hearings, there's been lots of commentary, there's been lots of back and forth debate, both public and private. So I do think there's been a significant period of listening. Whether I would have made the same choices had I been on the committee or consulted, I'm not sure. The answer is that nobody quite gets everything that they want in these kinds of complex decisions.
And finally, and briefly, if you wouldn't mind, where have you seen this done well? Where have you seen it and thought, yes, that was the right choice?
there are quite moving markers. For instance, one of the questions that was posed to me by your producer was the Bavarian solution. So in Bavaria, there are lots of sites, for instance, at concentration camps that have been converted into museums or places of learning. There have been documentation centers. I think that serves a very important purpose. As I mentioned already, the Stumbling Stones or Stolpersteine project, I think is a fascinating one that stops people in their tracks and gets them to pay attention. I'm not sure that there's a one-size-fits-all every kind of solution that would work for every case. I've also been to Georgia and been at Stalin's birthplace, which the cottage in which he was born is now encased in a temple. But of course, that's a very different kind of case. There are lots of different solutions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor. Professor Jeffrey Olick from the University of Virginia.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.